So I'll try not to spend too long in the backstory, but basically about 4-5 years ago, we moved back to the UK, 6 years ago, moved back to the UK from Ghana. I thought I'd escaped, and my mum got sick, and we came back to help look after her after an operation. But her operation went wrong, and we ended up having to stay. Now, we is myself and my son, and we'd moved from the UK when he was 8, because when I was pregnant with him and I was told I was having a boy, I straight away just had this feeling of I cannot bring up my son in the UK. So the plan to move away really started from then. And luckily, how these things are, things fell into place when he was about 7, and we were able to move away. But just before we left, actually 3 days before we left, which was really bizarre, his father died. So but everything had gone to Ghana. So, we weren't going to not go. I'd given up my flat, I'd rented a house in Ghana, my stuff was on a ship on the way to Ghana. So we stayed behind for about 3 months, did the funeral, all this stuff, and I moved to Ghana with my 8-year-old son, and that's where we were going to stay. And I always feel like, now, I feel like maybe we've lived this life before. So there was something in the thing of you're having a boy that was like, gotta leave, can't come back. And there was a real thing about not being back with him as a teenager. But I always felt like it would be fine for him to come back as an adult. Anyway, so we come back, Mum's operation goes wrong, and we end up staying. And it was kind of like, maybe it'll be 6 months, maybe it'll be 9 months, but of course over that time, I had 2 shops in Ghana, had to give up my shops because it just wasn't working out, trying to pay people to look after it. And I found myself really as a carer to my mum, who'd had this spinal operation go wrong. And I felt very isolated, I felt very, very alone, I felt very abandoned by my siblings, really. I felt like everybody is kind of, oh, Akua's back now, let's get on with our own lives while she takes care of Mum. And so during that time, I just wasn't really my son was doing well. He was always one of these kids, he was reading as he was talking. He was always good at school, always better with adults. I never really worried about him. And I think I fell into a depression and didn't really notice what was happening with him. And so he went from winning the school speech prize in his first 2 weeks back in the UK to failing in every single subject in a term. And I was just too in my head to really even fully understand what was going on. But I used to have this idea that naughty kids are the ones who don't come home after school. So as long as he was coming home at 4:30, everything else seemed okay. But it wasn't. My son ended up being groomed into a county lines drug dealing kind of group, and it started a massive nightmare that showed me that I needed to become a different person to deal with it. That was basically it, and I just didn't know how to become a different person fast enough, because the descent seemed so fast. So Google and YouTube were my friends, and I discovered a whole raft of modalities: tap-in, non-violent communication, faster EFT, which is a faster form of tapping, Cambo, which is a frog medicine, burn the top layer of skin, and you put it in, and it's a purgative, clears toxins, and psychological toxins as well. But I realized that I still needed more. And I had heard about ayahuasca, and but I didn't know anybody anymore who had anything to do with any kind of drugs, really. And I just remember having a feeling, like a knowledge, that maybe I would be able to find an African ayahuasca. So I Googled African ayahuasca, and Iboga came up. And I thought, I might know somebody, because in the African network, there's always an auntie who knows an auntie who knows an auntie. But actually, when it comes to psychedelics, there was no auntie who knew an auntie. But eventually, I was able to find an amazing woman who was able to give me iboga. And I always say that was like giving me a new spine. It really, really gave me a new brain to be able to deal with what was going on. And iboga then led me to psilocybin, because I realized that having made that massive shift, I now had the energy to deal with what was going on. I needed maintenance. And at £750 a time, which is what I paid to have the iboga, it couldn't be iboga. That couldn't be the maintenance, because while this was going on, I was paying for my son to have psychotherapy, which actually really wasn't working. I did find one person who was doing, I think it's called RMDR, rapid eye movement therapy. That really worked, but that was £500 an hour. Yeah, I didn't even know there were people who charged way less for that. All of these things were so new to me at the time. And I was kind of just telling, in Ghana we have a saying called, it's if you sell your illness, you will buy a cure. So I just was telling everybody everything, just kind of to try and find some medicine, to try and find something. And someone told me about Darren Springer. And I was like, so there's a black person in this psychedelic realm, and they're in London, and they're in East London, they're not far away. And I put his name into Google, and I think it was like on a Thursday, and on the Tuesday he was doing a talk. So I went to this talk on my own. I was so nervous going. Don't know, it was so weird just kind of going on your own, sitting in this talk. And he just blew my mind, talking about psilocybin magic mushrooms, the history of, the way it's been used across the world, across Africa, all these other medicines. And he was so passionate. And he also mentioned about Kalindi Ai, who was really his mentor. So, I got back home and I'm Googling Kalindi Ai and just watching lecture after lecture after lecture, and then discovering all of these scientists. So I'm watching everything I can find from maps, really understanding how this medicine works on the brain. And I just thought, okay, this stuff grows everywhere. And I know it used to grow on Hampstead Heath, because that's where I went to school. And the sixth formers were always, every autumn, up there grabbing their magic mushrooms. But since then, they spray a lot of the heath, but there's still parts where you can get magic mushrooms. So I was able to procure some. But I was actually, it's a bit weird, like I'd taken iboga, which loads of people say, oh my God, the medicine to meet the ancestors, iboga is so hard, it's so hard on you. But I was actually really scared of using magic mushrooms. Iboga hadn't been really hard. But what I realized was the lady I took it with, her protocol was what had made iboga not be hard. She had a very long protocol. You had to microdose iboga for 2 months. You were constantly working on your intentions over the 2 months, really cleaning up your intentions with the microdosing. And she was kind of like, if you can help it, try not to drink. I mean, I was still drinking. I couldn't stop that part. I'd have a drink, but I cleaned up other things a bit more. But I liked her protocol, and I liked her approach to constantly interrogating your intentions. And by the time I went to, and also with her, you had to do Cambo, the frog secretion, where they burn the top layer of skin, put the Cambo in, and you purge after drinking 2 litres of water. And something had happened where she was working from. So I actually ended up microdosing for 7 months instead of 2 months, and I had 9 lots of Cambo instead of 3. So I came to the medicine really, really clean and clear. And I think that's why the 3 days, she used to call it being on the carpet, the 3 days on the carpet, I had no purging, nothing about it was really difficult. So I really learnt the importance of preparation. And then afterwards, we did the integration, and then, you go home. And it was really good, and I told my family, told everybody. So from then, my siblings, who always kind of found me the weird one, and they wouldn't even try tapping, but I told them about Cambo, and they were interested in trying Cambo. Told them about Iboga, they were interested in Iboga, and I was thinking, wow, okay, I must be onto something, because if they don't even want to tap, but they want to take stuff where you purge, that something must be going on. And all the while, there's still this situation with my son, but what was happening was I could see the medicines were helping me to become the mother I needed to be for a child who's been groomed into this space. And now when I work with parents, I always say it doesn't even matter what the issue is. It's just about becoming the parent to the child with the issue. Anorexia, gangs, whatever. You just need to become a different person, because you no longer have the child you thought you had, and that's it. And so over time, I started really researching different protocols that people were using around the world. And one of the things that really got me looking at this was something Darren always says. He always says, Iboga is, in the West, it's used for kind of coming off drugs and everything. And he always says, but in the countries where they use Iboga, they're not suffering from drug addiction. So what is this medicine really for? And that really started to get me thinking about psychedelics and what they do for you. And all the while, it's like I'm coming up with more thoughts about everything, thoughts about racism, thoughts about just being somewhere where you're not happy to be. What does that mean to be somewhere you're not happy to be without the means to disappear from there? So, everything's going on, but the situation is still going on. And after a while, I found a really, really good, and I'm still constantly Googling, YouTubing, and I found a really good book by a guy called R. Coleman called Psychedelic Psychotherapy. And it was brilliant because he really went into how he treated his clients using psychotherapy and psychedelics, and also different formulas for different problems. And what I could see between what he talked about and another book that I found called, I think it's like In the Footsteps of My Master, but it's by a woman called Diane Benscoter. And she was rescued out of a cult, and then she became somebody who rescued people out of cults. And from reading her book, I realized that my son was behaving like he was in a cult. I could see that his mind was no longer his. So through following her book, she gave me the roadmap of how to re-engage with my son. And then by following our Coleman's book, I started to come up with a protocol of how I could use the medicines on my son. But although he was out there selling drugs, he was actually really anti-taking drugs himself. So it was never going to be that easy to get him to take any of the medicines. So I would just tell him constantly my process. and go into a lot of details, and I would send him all these different people's papers. I'd send him interviews with Dr. Rosalind Watts, who's like such a kindly scientist, that I used to think, you know, hopefully this will try to change his mind, because she just looks so cute and she sounds so nice. So I'd send him all of this stuff, and I would also study all of this stuff to try and come up with a protocol that would work on him, because I knew I would only really have one chance with him to try with the medicines. And R. Coleman talked about a really good combo for people who are suffering from PTSD, how to calm them down, how to help them have a good global look at what happened to them, what is happening to them, have empathy for themselves, have empathy for all the people all around them, and then doing deeper work with psilocybin. And the medicine that he found was really good for the first part was MDMA. So I thought, brilliant, that's what my son needs. I need him to come out of his body, see everything, and then we'll go in with the psilocybin magic mushrooms. But trying to get him to come and take all of this was definitely not going to be easy. So that's actually where Baba Siete came in. So he really, really helped me with pouring libation at the crossroads to Elegba, and just really I had a long list that I took to Elegba. It wasn't just, you know, bring him home. It was get him home, unarrested, no drugs on him, no money on him. And this was my constant Monday, pouring libation at the crossroads. And also just open his mind. Don't just open the door to let him come out, but open his mind, open his mind, open his mind. Open my mind so I can find a way to help him open his mind. So I came up using kind of all these different protocols and having lots and lots of conversations with people like Darren. And by then I'd started to meet some of these scientists, and I was hearing more and more about how they use the medicines and some of the things that we're not helping in these trials. So you've got people, they're suffering from depression, they'll go in for a trial, they do really well, they'll get the high dose, and then next time you might get the low dose, and next time you might get the middle dose, and you're starting to feel better, and then the trial finishes, and then you're left on your own. So I knew that if I could get my son to come to the table to take the medicine, it wasn't going to be a one-time thing. It was going to have to be a constant thing to work through all the layers. And I learned a lot about how the medicines work on our brain by upsetting what they call and I always get this wrong, default mode network. Yes, I think that's the right way round. So how I used to imagine it was, how we think is we go, our personalities, our ways of thinking, our ways of understanding means that when we think about something, we go to our own A, B, C, D. So this is why we always end up repeating things. So for myself, I start off every morning, today, in the nighttime, I am not going to have bread and butter. This is my A to B. Come 7 o'clock, something happens and I find myself in the kitchen, by the toaster, suddenly there's butter in my hands. That's my default mode network. So what I learned that the magic mushrooms in particular do is, when you take it, your brain starts, you think A, and these sort of electrical pathways go all over the place to get answers. They're no longer going to your B, now they're going to your D or your F. They're just moving all around. And this is how you can start to make changes. But I also learned that because of the trials and how many people had started to fall back into depression, you've got to keep it up. And you've also got to take what you're learning into your real life world during that window of time when you're not so easily triggered. So I kind of wrote a lot of stuff down, and I made a little map of how I thought this could work and how things were working on me. And through that, that's when I came up with the 4 principles of how I use the medicines. So with my son, I went in with MDMA, but I had to repair our relationship first. He wouldn't have said yes if our relationship wasn't repaired. So all of that happened through lots and lots of medicine, but lots and lots of modalities. I was able to repair our relationship enough for him to trust me, to come home and agree to take the medicine. And I followed our Coleman's recommendation of the MDMA to just bring down the PTSD, because I also realized by then that my son was suffering from serious PTSD because of what he'd been through. He'd been robbed in a drug deal and had baseball bat to the head, ended up in hospital. Lord knows what he has done. You know, I have never to this day found out any of that stuff, but I know that terrible things happen to these young people, and I saw, if there was a loud bang, the way he would absolutely react. So I knew that things had happened. But in our Coleman's book, he never tells you the amount of MDMA. So I did a body scan. I asked myself how much MDMA to give him. Later on, a scientist said that I actually gave him too much, but it's fine. He was all right. He had a great time. I gave him just under 0.5 gram of MDMA because I just thought I've got to push him past his comfort zone so that he can get this global vision. And it worked. And he saw himself from the outside, and he saw how his behavior had impacted everybody. And he was able, in that moment, to say, I'm going to stop doing this. But I also knew that there was a period of time where that decision would work. After a while, his, old pathways would return. So we did that first, and then we went in with the magic mushrooms the next day. And I went in with a heroic dose, 5 grams, which I think is the best amount for doing proper work. Like, if you really want to shift things, I think you have to start at 5 grams. And you will know yourself after 5 grams if you need more. Because sometimes you can be so traumatized in your life that actually still under 5 grams, you're still really holding on. So some people will realize, 5 grams, but actually next time I can go to 8. Or, and you can move up incrementally, bit by bit. So my first protocol is kind of like, once you decide that maybe your mind is, well, this is what I thought. My mind is like an old computer where all the programs just aren't working properly. And doesn't have what it needed to download the new patches. It was just something wasn't right. I needed new software. I needed new programs. And so I think if you're in a space where that's how you're feeling, or you're really kind of like, I don't know what my purpose is, there's that kind of unhappiness. There's stuff to do with parents, families, same relationship dynamics, turning up with different people. I always say to people, go to the medicine with what you want to let go of, what you want to get rid of, what you want to come in. Don't go to the medicine with wanting to understand more about. It's such a bullshit kind of way of thinking, because I think when you want to know more about something, you can miss a lot of the information the medicine's giving you because it's an inquiry. What you're really looking at is emptying yourself of whatever it is that you need to empty yourself of. And I really also believe in spending quite a long time in the intention phase. Day after day, writing about it, thinking about it, and putting down as many different intentions as you want. It doesn't matter if you start off with a list of 20 things you want to let go of. Eventually, what you start seeing is a bit of a thread, and you might end up with 6 of those things. But it kind of doesn't matter, because the medicine will always start at what's the first thing that's got to go for you to get closer to what you want anyway. So you have your intentions, and then you start to clean yourself. So most of us, especially if you're meat eating, if you eat a lot of white foods, have a certain amount of candida overgrowth. And candida overgrowth can affect your trip, because what I learnt was that you can end up with, as you start to, if you chew the mushrooms, what can happen is that more of the candida can go to the part of the brain receptors that would hold on to the psilocybin. So it can give you a really weird feeling trip. It actually feels like the medicine is sick. It's very, very bizarre. So it's really good to have something like clover flower tea. Start drinking that 3-4 cups a day, every day, and that will start to kill off a lot of candida. Lorna is going to speak later on about getting rid of parasites. So just about everything Lorna recommends works. Doing enemas are really good. Drinking, there's wormwood. Wormwood is also really, really good for getting rid of worms and parasites. And when you start working with the things that get rid of parasites, you actually start thinking clearer anyway. So it helps you with the intention setting. And I always think at least 10 days. If you're somebody who's already quite clean, maybe 3-4 days. And then definitely, I would say the last 3 days, no alcohol, no coffee. But if you were here a couple of months ago when Darren was speaking, he was saying, you know, he's tried mushrooms every which way, on a full stomach, not on a full stomach, drinking, not drinking. You know, he's experimented in different ways. So it just depends on what you're going for. But I think if you're going for trying to clean up some trauma, it's really good for as long as you can, even if it's just 24 hours before. Because also, there's a part of our subconscious that's built up these things as a protection. So sometimes we know we want to cure, we know we want to do better, but there's also a part of us that's keeping us from doing better. And I'll give myself as an example. It's been about 5 weeks of trying to find the day to go the next step for myself with the medicine. And constantly, I'm too busy. Oh no, I had a glass of wine. Oh no, you know, all of this stuff. And I'm totally aware, okay, yeah, Akua, you're playing with yourself here. But it's still waiting for you. It's still sitting there. So now I've got my sister involved. So my big sister on Monday is going to be around, and it's going to happen. And it's going to be 10 or 12. I think that's why I'm a little bit kind of like, a bit sort of nervous about it. But I just find that period of cleaning and thinking and writing and reflecting is really, really good. Loads of answers start to come in. And in my experience, from the moment I make the intention to start working with the medicine, it seems like the medicine starts to work anyway, which is, yeah, that's when the weird things kind of happen with times and medicines anyway. But so you've got your intentions, and then what I like to do on the day, if I can, if I'm lucky, I used to try and always go and see a body of water first. But that was just, for me, through a trip thing. There was something about water in it, and that's what it feels feels good to me. Everybody has what they like to do beforehand, but I like doing that one. And then I will usually actually make an altar, a specific altar for that day, for that period of time, and I'll open the circle. But all of that stuff is kind of what I like to do for me. And then I'll start to take the medicine. And I always say, take the medicine any which way that's easy for you for it to go down. Whether it's a tea, some people really believe in chewing the whole dry thing and, sitting there like a warrior. I used to be that person, but I think I'm moving away from being so hard-nosed about that. So it's up to you, however you want to have it, as an omelette, whatever, just get it down you, as Kalindi I used to say. And then I find it's good to have a bath beforehand, just like taking yourself to the mushrooms as a ceremony as well, cleaning yourself, getting some warm things, having some extra blankets, because there can be that period of time as your body is changing and vibrating to meet the frequency of the medicine, where you can get quite cold. So it's good to have some extra blankets, and it can feel really uncomfortable and juddery, especially as the visuals are starting and there's loads and loads and loads of colours and loads of movement. It's good to really go to the breath and just only focus on how you're breathing, just letting everything else play out while your brain is like giving you so many insights and it's all going on. Just staying with the breath, staying with the breath, staying with the breath. Some people start to feel a bit sick. A good thing that I find that's good for that is to have some really strong ginger tea. So if you boil up a whole bunch of ginger and just have that near you, if you feel a bit sick, just having little sips, but staying with the breath, staying with the breath. Sometimes it can start to feel a bit scary. I found saying to the medicine, show me in another way, can be good. Sometimes it won't, and then you just have to try and go into acceptance and stay with the breath. It's good to have somebody with you if you're inexperienced and you are going to go for 5 grams. I should have said that at the start. Find somebody empathetic, good, maybe not with an axe to grind. So it's not always the right decision to use your partner, I would say. So only you would know where you are in your relationship. So, but it's good to have a neutral, sympathetic person who's there just to care for you, and with a few kind of ground rules. So not too much interaction. If you're crying, to let you cry. Have the tissues close by, but, and I say if you're sitting for somebody and they ask for a hug, I think it's okay to give them a hug, but actually you're the one to maintain the boundary. So a loose hug, like one of those, like that kind of hugs. Pardon? Because I think when somebody's tripping, and they're feeling alone and they're feeling abandoned, there's a reason why the medicine is showing them that. And I think you can maybe interfere with that by giving them exactly what they want. Because sometimes you're feeling something, and if you feel it to the end, there's a huge realization at the end of it. Also, sometimes people can get a bit horny, on magic mushrooms. And then, you're hugging up somebody and then, it's all getting, and then the next minute they come out of it and they're like, oh my God, you did that to me. And then you're like, shit. So, it's you just got to remember that somebody is in a vulnerable position. So, you don't want to reject them, but it's good to maintain that you're there as a pillar. And I think actually if you sit for somebody and they're starting to go under, it's good for you to actually sit there and imagine yourself as two pillars, either side of them, protecting them. Because in that realm, people really feel your intentions. So that's not the time to be on your phone, you know, answering some messages and stuff. Like, really be present, really be in your breath so that you can really be there for them. Somebody might be having a chatty trip, and you've just got to feel it out. If it's worth chatting to them, or are they trying to get away from the trip? So as the person doing the sitting, it's quite good to discuss with the person, especially if it's a friend, beforehand, you know, come up with a whole bunch of, you know, if this happens, what do you prefer, well, I don't want to do this, and blah, blah, blah. You know, you work it out between yourselves. And I think as the person sitting and doing the guiding, your job is really just to make sure they don't fall over, they get to the toilet, they get back to the room, the tissues are there, the bucket's there if they want to be sick, you know, not too much more than that. So the trip can be anything from 4.5 to 6.5 hours. A lot of people after about 4 hours think the trip's finished. 5 grams, yeah. It can be longer if it's more. 10 grams can be 7-8 hours. So yeah, it definitely, and sometimes even 1 or 2 grams can still be 6 hours. It really depends on, I think, the constitution of the person and the kind of trip that they're having. But on 5 grams, they're going to trip, but they're not lost. You know, they know where they are. They know they're in the room, even if they're very active in a story that's happening to them at the time. And I think, so yeah, you help them to the toilet, all of that kind of stuff. And if it is a chatty one, I think, yeah, like I was saying, just gauge the level of chattiness. Some people might just need you to just say yes. So they're talking to somebody else and they just need you to say yes. And so you stay there and you're just yes, whatever it is that they're saying. Some people might want to have a conversation where they're working out something. And then you have to really be in a place of trying not to be in judgment and feeding them maybe with more questions than, you know, having a bit of a conversation, but feeding them with more questions and trying not to answer too much, because they are open and they're working out their own processes. But more often than not, to be quiet if you can and leave them to have their trip. So if someone isn't nervous, then just being outside the door, because sometimes if you're in the room, the person may not want to cry. And very often, the first time you have 5 grams, whatever grief is sitting at the top of your heart will come. So it's quite good to just, if somebody, you know, they're in the bed, they're warm, you can just be, I'm just outside the door, and then they can happily cry if that's what they need to do. But it also, yeah. Mm. Right. I know, because you like it outside. So I've had different experiences outside than inside. So if I'm working on something therapeutically, I tend to do it inside, in the dark, in that controlled space. Now, actually, since your last talk, I've had a very interesting experience with a tree. And it's made more sense what happens to me when I trip outside. So personally, when I trip outside, it doesn't feel like I'm tripping at all. Even on 9 grams outside, I'm with my family. So that's why I kind of haven't done therapeutic work outside. But yeah, last week I had mad. I'll just tell you quickly. I had a dream, a very bizarre dream. There was owls, and even in the dream, I was thinking, well, this is very symbolic. You know, this owl kind of diving in, eating 2 of my 4 lizards, and then it ate it secretly, and I was thinking, you naughty owl. And then I was trying to chuck it out the window, and it wouldn't go, and it kept on coming in. So I finished the dream, just about to wake up. And normally, just before I wake up is when I will meditate, because I find it's deeper. So I started to meditate, and suddenly there was a tree. And I sort of thought, oh, you're interesting. And then I fused with the tree. And I knew I was fusing with the tree. And I'm also thinking, I know I'm not asleep, and I know I'm not dreaming, because I can hear the birds outside, but I'm fusing with this tree. And I recognized this tree from another experience where I went into the soil and I was at the bottom of this same tree. So it's made me think that's why I trip differently outside. So everybody's different, because I know you love it outside, don't you? So yeah, everybody's different with that. But yeah, indoors for me for working on stuff. And I think if I was sitting with somebody who was working on something, I'd probably keep them indoors just so they wouldn't get distracted, unless it was like a walking trip on a very small amount, though. I probably wouldn't go walking with somebody on 5 grams, just in case. And it would depend how experienced they were. You know, if I was going for a walk with Darren and he wanted to take 10 grams, I'd figure he's all right. But yeah, somebody else, I'd probably be like maybe 1 kind of thing. So on the other side of the trip, when you've got the 4-hour mark and people think it's, oh, yeah, no, it's a funny chair, that one. Yeah, people think they're out. If it's 4 hours and you're sitting for somebody, you can say to them, why don't you just lie down for a little bit longer and just see what else the medicine has to show you? And usually they'll get a little bit of extra, kind of like 1.5 hours, 2 hours, and then when they're totally clear, they will know that they're totally clear. So then you move into the integration phase, which is, right, what did you see? I find if you're sitting for somebody, it's quite helpful if you take the notes and they can just say what they saw, what they felt, what realizations. And people go backwards and forwards because just like with a dream, you say one bit and then you go, oh, yeah, but I forgot to tell you this happened. And just keep writing it down and remembering the intentions, because you're looking for the threads between what they wanted to let go of or what they wanted more of and what they saw. And so you do that and you really, really discuss it. You spend a long time. So I know there's lots of people who will go to a circle and maybe there's 10 people doing mushrooms all together. I think that's fine. But personally, I'm not sure, or if you do that afterwards, make sure you go back and really write down exactly what you saw and try to do the work that came out of it. Because if you're lucky enough to have somebody with you, you can spend a really long time, like 2-3 hours, and it deserves that length of time for one person's story. Rather than in a group where everybody's just speaking for a couple of minutes and moving on. I think if you're doing it for a friend or a family member, yeah, really get into it, really dissect it. And after you've dissected it, the last part is what I call the work. And that I'll normally put stars next to that. And that is all the things that have come out from the trip, that is what you now have to do so that you're further away from your problems. So, and with the list of the work, I say stick it on your bedroom door or a mirror that you're going to see every day, because what I find is my subconscious will forget the work a day later. Because I'll be on that, yeah, I'm feeling really good now, yeah, everything got sorted out, and then it's all a bit kind of, I remember the nice pictures, but I don't remember the work. So an example I'll give of the work is one that a friend of mine told me. So she'd done the medicine, done her integration, and one of the work was that, and I'm allowed to say this part, that's why I'm using that example. She'd gone in wanting to repair a family dynamic that always ended up with her having to rescue her parents and chuck out a sibling, and she just didn't want that role anymore. What she actually found under the medicine was that her anxiety about it made her do things that made things escalate to that point where she would do what she thought was rescuing. Actually, what she saw was dominating, taking over, and getting rid of her sibling. So the work was, when she felt this anxiety, she was to do nothing. That was the work. Let it play out. Just breathe and be inside and stay with what is happening inside her body, and leave her parents and sibling to kill each other if that's what is going to happen. And she told me that what was interesting was actually the next about 3 family occasions, nothing happened. Stuff happened inside of her, with her feeling like, oh my God, and then realizing, oh, conversation's moved on. And so she was observing herself, and she said it took to about the 4th family occasion where they did all have a row. She didn't ask her sibling to leave. Everybody went quiet for a bit, and then everyone started chatting again. So, so that's the work. So you always have to really tease out the work. If you're not careful, you'll leave out the work because you've done the integration and you think, yeah, I understand. But I always think the medicine gives you homework. And the homework is really, really important. One of my homeworks that I get nearly every time in a slightly different way, but it's the same homework. I'm really good at worrying. And I give it a different spin every time. You know, I feel like one of those cocktail people. I can do that with worry. Today, my worry was just like, orange juice, next time it's like a margarita, but it's still worry, you know, I'm just playing around with this thing. So often the work for me is whatever the new way my worrying is going. So the last one that I had, and it was a really big medicine trip, so it was very, very vivid, was I saw that my worry about my niece, one of my nieces has loads of children, and she works away. And I was getting really, really worried. I kept on thinking, oh my God, all the paedophiles in the area know that she's not around, Like I was really, really worrying, and I'd be constantly, every time I rang her, listen, we'll help you, just do a little shop, you know, stop this teaching, you can't keep leaving the kids. In my head, it felt really, really kind of rational and normal. And when I would say it to everybody, they all agreed with me. And in the trip, what I saw was I would leave out the fact that she has a husband. I would leave out the fact that actually 4 of the kids are grown up. You know, it's not my life to be worrying. And also what I was shown was this worry, because of my own gifts, were like poison darts into their future. So this worry about paedophiles was throwing paedophile dart into their future. It was just like, and then one of my deities who comes to me showed me how to pull them back, and I was just pulling back. So the work for me after that was leave her the fuck alone. Just fucking stop it. Leave her alone. Just ask her how she is. Ask her how the kids are. Ask her if she needs anything. Instead of this incessant worry. And what's been really interesting is actually now her mum's helped her and she's bribed the right people and they've moved her to a school that's just round the corner from her house. She's just had the 8th child, and actually I'm really happy for her because I'm just like, have 10 and let me have the last 2. You know, it's it's a different thing. Whereas before, I think from child 4, every time I heard she was pregnant, I just, oh my God. You know, and actually now I see, no, the elder ones are really good kids. You know, her eldest son, he takes care of all the money all of us in the UK send to him. He's 15. He can give money to builders to do stuff. He's looking after stuff. There's a part of me that may not think this is perfect, and I may think that, oh, actually this is too much responsibilities. I don't know his soul. I don't know the reason why he's the eldest of 8 children. I don't know the gifts that he's come with that makes him able to deal with all this stuff. But what I can do is support him in what he's doing, rather than this worry, this worry, this worry. That I realize actually is, what I was shown was, it's like the other end of my talent. So what I was shown is I have a talent to create things. The other end of the talent to create things is, with the same voice of creation, can be the voice of destruction. And so it's where to use this creative ability. And so I've been shown time and time again, as I say, my thing is worry, the worrying over my son. You know, from the moment I was told, you're going to have a boy, straight, I cannot bring up a black boy in this country because. And what did I get? All of the becauses. You know, and I can see all the time the medicine's showing me, you think you stop worrying, but look where you're doing it over there. You're worrying about your mum. And during COVID, I had to really sit with that, because mum went and got jabbed up and all of this stuff. And when I was working with the medicine, you know, I was shown we all have the same information. If she decides to have this jab and she gets ill, you will look after her because she's your mum. Don't worry about it. And everybody else I know who got jabbed up, they were all ill for 2 days. My mum comes home, nothing. She's just still, that's her life. And so for me, always the work, one of the first things is always another way in which I'm worrying, and I'm shown, just don't worry. Doing this event, I worry so much. I worry so much, and then I'm like, oh, bloody hell, okay, everything will be all right because the medicine said do this. And I just realized, okay, creativity, use the creative force that you have in another way. Don't let it slide. So, yes. Yeah, just want it gone. In Ghana, we say, why has a long tail? Right, yeah. Why? I did get a why once over my dad, and he wasn't even in my intentions, but we don't really have a relationship. And I was shown that one of the things we had all inherited from my dad was keeping prisoner in our hearts the emotions of loss. And I was shown all these negative emotions actually wanted to go. They didn't want to stay, and we kept them prisoner. And I remember trying to find the keys to my heart to just let loss go. And then I suddenly saw my dad, and there was chains and keys and all around him. Loss was trying to get out, but my dad just had it so locked up. And it gave me an insight into why my dad has always been in this place of loss and greed, equally loss and greed, while at the same time having been gifted by his father 56 acres of prime gold-filled land. And still my father sits in a place of loss and greed. And it was weird and interesting seeing that, because I saw his why, and it was like, okay, so I need to be getting rid of that shit from me. And I was trying to unlock it for him, and I couldn't, and I saw it wasn't my job to do. And a bit like what Siete was saying about family stuff, I get shown a lot of family healing on the matrilineal line, but every time I try to go to the patrilineal line, it's not really working. Maybe not yet. Maybe I need higher doses to get to that place. I suspect that the lines that you can work on are to do with the amount of love. And I feel like because there's always been so much love from the matrilineal line, it's been easier to work on that line, whereas there hasn't been as much love on the patrilineal line. So now I'm trying to have a relationship with my grandfather, my father's father, who's an ancestor. And so I have, but you know, it's funny, I put his name on my familial altar, and every time I go, it's fallen off. So I asked Saya about it, and she said some people don't want to be with the other people, so he probably needs a little place just for himself. So, but that's something to still work on, because as much as one of the work actually after that trip was have more compassion for Dad, and I really thought I had it, because it was like, yeah, I'm going to go and visit him, phoned him and everything. Have I been? No, I haven't been. I haven't been. There's always something else to do. So the work is always there, but if you have it in front of you, you can at least know when you're not doing it, you know. So that, for me, is the most important thing, is the work list and working through it. And when you can't, taking that one back to the medicine. So when I go in again at 10 or 12, I'll go back with the Dad one, just because I'm on this earth now, I might as well. You know, I don't feel it as a trauma, but that doesn't matter. It's something that's in my life, so I should do. So those are really my principles of sitting for oneself and sitting for somebody else. And then after the work, I think it's worth having a few more conversations with the person who sat for you, to just kind of see how you're getting on and maybe start to work towards the next time as well. So yeah, any questions? I think it's totally, totally different for everybody. I have an ancestor who comes every time now, but I never see her. She's a Jamaican woman, and she exists somewhere in my head, and she speaks spells. I see Kali, and I see Green Tara. And the last big trip, as I was coming out, I saw Baron Samedi, and he was like, next time I'll take you to the underworld. And I remember Kalindi Ai saying, if you're lucky, you don't need an introduction to certain deities. They will come and they will take you to certain spaces. So I hope. But yeah, some people see it. Say that again? Oh, Green Tara is, I think, Chinese tradition. Kali is Indian tradition, but I think she goes back way back. The Jamaican woman who is in my head, I have no idea where she's from, only that she's from Jamaica. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, Iboga. Yeah. I think it depends on you. If you're really frightened or worried about going in, microdosing can be helpful. If you're really anxious about where you are in terms of the problem that you're taking to the medicine, microdosing can be helpful. If you're dealing with something that's ever present straight away, microdosing can be helpful. But microdosing, if you're, let's say you're really, really, really anxious, microdosing can also help bring on the tears and stuff you're trying to repress. So it doesn't always work as making you be able to just do things. Sometimes it will bring it up, which is also really good. It feels really uncomfortable at the time, and you will be shown what it is you have to do. With me, it's walking, and I'll walk, and then I'll get home, and I'll just feel like, why was I upset? Why was I worried? But, you know, if you'd seen me half an hour before, you'd be like, Jesus Christ, she's a mess. So, yeah, it just depends.
With taking mushrooms, is this something you do as a lifelong process, or is it you get to a particular point and then that's it?
I think it's a lifelong process, because I don't feel that we come here and the story is finished. It seems like some people, like I listen to Muji, and I definitely feel he is somebody who has seen enlightenment, in that he understands what it is to be in that place of being present and going in and asking the questions that bring you back to the fact that you are not, you know, you are not this, but you are the observer, and there is somebody even beyond the observer, which Edison tomorrow will kind of like be talking about. There are definitely people who can wake up and be enlightened, but I think for most of the people that I know have been working with the medicines for a long time, it can be a lifelong. But the woman actually who gave me Iboga, she was told in an Iboga trip that she was now finished with the medicine. And she'd fused with the medicine, and she's not to take it anymore. And so she doesn't take Iboga or ayahuasca anymore. So everybody's is different. Yeah. No. So the question was, because there's lots of different types of mushrooms and different potencies, if you're working with around 5 grams, you know, should you be mindful of the variety of mushrooms? And yes and no. So I once had something with a really weird name, something like Ninja Mindfuck, I think it was called, yeah. And it definitely felt like a heavy rock mushroom. Yeah, there was something I was just like, oh, I wonder if this is the skunk of mushrooms. Like afterwards, I was like, yeah, I'm not buying Ninja Mindfuck again, you know. But I find golden teachers, I find really, really pleasant. Amazonians, really, really pleasant. But the one that I think I love and it loves me is Liberty Caps. Liberty Caps, even if I microdose on one, and they're so tiny, like one little Liberty Cap, it's like we're coming home to each other. So Liberty Caps are my absolute favorite, but I'd have to speak to somebody else. Sister, what do you think of Liberty Caps? Because I saw you, yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. Liberty Caps just seem to, yeah, and profound and really nice. But yeah, I think most of them are kind of okay. The only one I think I probably wouldn't recommend is that Ninja Mindfuck. But there might be people. Well, you know, they all look a bit the same. Yeah, that's the thing. So, I mean, I've had penis envy, and that was fine. And that does look like penises, though. So I did wonder about them, but they seemed fine. Yeah, so I think, and some are stronger than others. I mean, you never really know, you know. Yes. Yeah, I find because it doesn't change your heart rate or anything like that. So my mum, even though she's normally on very serious pain meds, she can still microdose. And she's been in hospital recently, and she's been having slightly more than microdosing because she's been in so much pain while she's been there, and it's absolutely fine. I haven't really heard of anybody on any kind of medication where they couldn't have magic mushrooms, and probably you wouldn't have, like with my mum, I wouldn't give her 5 grams, and I don't even think she's having half a gram. I think she's, having a fifth.
You mentioned preparing yourself before you take magic mushrooms. Is fasting one way you prepare yourself?
Yes, yeah. So definitely kind of like the day or the night that you're going to take it, you want to have very little in your stomach, if anything, because sometimes they can make you feel a bit sick. So you're less likely to throw up if you've got stuff in your stomach. I mean, one of the ways in which I've been avoiding taking the medicine is kind of like, oh my God, did I eat that toast? Oh, well, tomorrow, so it's even though, and then I get a little Darren voice saying, sis, you could still take it, but, it's... So Jim Fadiman he's a scientist with a free website, jimfadiman.com, and he has all sorts of measurements for all sorts of things. And so Jim Fadiman says 1/10 of a gram is a microdose. But some people, 1/10 of a gram is still strong for them. So you kind of have to feel it out for yourself. If you weigh a gram, try 1/10 in a morning where you're going to have a free morning and just see how it is for you. Because I know for me with Liberty Caps, one little mini Liberty Cap I will feel. So I might do one little Liberty Cap if I was going to have a difficult conversation, because I know I will really have a lot of empathy for the person, I'll have a lot of empathy for me. So I find that very potent, whereas with everything else, a microdose just makes things a little bit easier and it's not so profound. All right, so she was just asking that if somebody was sitting for a friend taking psilocybin, would the person taking the medicine be allowed to sleep? Did you say allowed to sleep? Somebody can take it and look like they're sleeping, and they'll 6 hours later tell you they saw all sorts of things. So, but I mean, you couldn't take 5 grams and jump into bed and sleep. No, but you might not be moving, and there'll be all sorts going on. In the blue. Yes, definitely. When I took Iboga, I knew it really was grandfather. It really was a male or masculine energy, very clear, but it was also very Saturn, the planet kind of energy. I felt it to be very ordered and stuff. Whereas with mushrooms, when I first took mushrooms, I think they were being very playful with me. They were just kind of like little gnome type of energy. Yeah, but as soon as I started getting serious, because the first a couple of times, 5 grams, and then one day on the way out of 5, it was so funny. It was just like a slightly different voice was like 7.5 next time. And it's almost like, So I did 7.5, and the day I did 7.5 was so funny. I did it at my friend's house on my own, and I remember I've told this story so many times. I went to get in the bed and I had all my clothes off, and the mushrooms was like, you come to us naked and dirty, go and wash. I was like, oh God, got in the shower, and I was also scared because I'm coming up and I'm having a shower, but it was like I had to have a shower, finish the shower, dried off, got back in. You're coming to us with no clothes on, get out. Had to get up, put all this clothes on, but it was one of those cold, juddery ones for about 2 hours. And that's when the mushrooms took me to a totally different realm. And since then, every time I trip, I go somewhere near that same realm. So I'm not having, if I go under 5, I have different trips. If I go 5 or above, I go to the same place, same deities turn up, similar work goes on. And the intentions I take in, they deal with it so fast. I'm like, you people are taking the piss. I've spent weeks honing my intention, and they're literally kind of like, these are earthly worries. Like, I've been going into the medicines for 2 years. I'm like, please let me lose weight. Show me how to lose it. It doesn't even want to talk about it. It's just, it's like, get out of here. You know, we've got real work to do. So they're funny medicines, and they do different things with different people, because I think, you know, our ancestors are beyond humankind. And so I think sometimes you find a plant, a flower, and that's an ancestor of yours. And so you're guided in a different way. Yes?
Is it safe? I mean, I'm not experienced in mushrooms at all. I've had mushrooms here before, and that was a crazy experience. I think as well, because when you're a little bit more sensitive and you can see some things, what is the best way, what is the best strategy to take this? Obviously you said microdosing. What if that's too strong?
Go less. Yeah, go less, because some people are really, really sensitive. So you should go less. But if you are really sensitive and you do want to just have a normal amount, then have somebody with you. Yeah, and do it deliberately. I mean, I think mushrooms are the worst kind of party drug. Like, really, not for partying. It's a waste of money, and, you know, you could end up having a really horrible experience if you try and party on it. So, yeah, MDMA if you want to party. I think it's quite good to not be in the best state. I think sometimes people are waiting to feel better. And I think, no, go in when it's bad. Yeah, go in when it's bad, because you've got more chance of excavating some stuff. It's just like if you're tapping, you know, you try and access more of the trauma and tap on it to do more work. So I think, yeah, go in when you're feeling shit, and then you'll come out and you'll have so much more insights. This lady and then that lady. Yeah, I can't tell you the scientific name, methyl, blah, 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 blah. But it's, some people are a bit anti-MDMA because it's made in a lab. But it works by lowering your inhibitions. It gives you a global feeling of love for yourself, for other people. It's a really good medicine for looking at trauma. It's a good medicine for relationships. So originally it was used in couples therapy because it was a really good way of people really being able to understand and hear each other, and also really hear where they were coming from. So that's what MDMA is really good for. It's used a lot with therapies with all these returning soldiers who are traumatized mostly by what they've done rather than what was done to them. People are very traumatized by that. Pardon? It's illegal, but they're allowed to do trials on it. I mean, all these things we're talking about are all illegal, but there are places where it is legal. So Jamaica, you can take magic mushrooms legally. I think you might even be able to take MDMA legally there. I'm not sure. There's states in America now where you can take magic mushrooms legally. Holland, well, as truffles, but it's magic mushrooms. Here it's illegal, but they've got a group of scientists now looking at the ethics. So we're probably about 18 months, 2 years away from it being legal. And the companies who are paying for all the scientific trials, I mean, they're now worth millions and millions and millions, because everybody knows that as soon as they say they're legal, these will be what's going to be prescribed for depression. And then they'll probably start really, really pushing down on all the people who've been selling mushrooms illegally. So it's probably is well worth learning how to grow mushrooms at this point, so that when that happens, because at the moment what happens is if you're arrested and you've got magic mushrooms, because they're going to change the law soon, the police will normally just kind of like, you know, go away, leave us alone type of thing. But I think once it's made legal, there'll be other ways in which they'll try and stamp on the illegal trade. Yeah, Cambo. Yeah, not Bufo. No, not Bufo. I haven't done Bufo. There are other people who have. I haven't been drawn to Bufo. That seems to be so into other realms. I'm not really sure. It's from a secretion from the frog. Yeah, so the body reacts to it, and basically all the toxins in you go into the water that you've drunk, and then you purge it out. No, there's no visuals with Cambo. It's just a purgative, but you feel so light afterwards. You feel really, really good. Yeah, it was one of the first, until I found someone who could provide me with the Cambo. But I really recommend, with the Iboga, but I really recommend Cambo. It's a really, really good one for, just clearing and dealing with stuff for sure. Gentleman in the white? Syrian rue I've had with mushrooms because it gives you a deeper, longer experience. But I've got some Syrian rue at home. I'm funny with Syrian rue. It's shown me other, I don't even know if it's dimensions, other weird things with the medicines with Syrian rue. So I don't add it to my mushrooms unless I've got a couple of professional friends, and if I'm with them, as in medical professional, psychological professional people, then I might add Syrian rue to the mushrooms just for a longer trip. But I haven't worked with it for years. I'm not sure about Syrian rue for me. Yeah. Wow, that sounds really interesting, because I know that the Vikings also used to use Syrian rue, and I heard Kalindi Ai talking about the Sufis also working with Syrian rue, and the whole thing of, is it Aladdin and the magic carpet? Yeah, that's, he says that's a lot to do with working with Syrian rue, because it's also a dye. So he says they were taking the Syrian rue and also using it to dye wool, and the carpet would be like a map. So you would take the Syrian rue and you would look at the carpet, and it would be terrains that your ancestors had explored, in the other realms, and so you can carry on where they've left off. And I know that there are certain traditions in Mexico where they do a similar thing. So you're not starting the whole journey again. You've got carpets and weavings of terrains that your ancestors have got to, and then they've woven that in a piece of cloth. So you take the medicine and you've got a map. So you're always going further and further and further, and then you create something for those to come later on. So yeah, very, very interesting. But yeah, maybe one day if I find someone with the time for the 12 hours, I'll try. Darren Springer. Yeah, Darren Springer. Yeah, loads of videos, huge knowledge, loads and loads and loads and loads of knowledge. And also Kalindi Ayi, or Kalindi E. His surname is I-Y-I. Somebody else can maybe spell Kalindi. Yes, sis. The breath. Yeah, I think it's the breath. And I think if you know the fact that you're never completely out of your body, I think the fear about most psychedelics is that, you know, you might run around the field completely naked or something. The chances are, if you're doing 5 grams, you're not going to do that because you're not completely out of your head. So you're still there. I mean, you might do something a little bit silly, I suppose, but you probably wouldn't mind afterwards. But if you're scared, I always think go to the breath. If you go to the breath and the image won't change, then you've just got to be mature about it and know, okay, I have to see this. I mean, when I was a kid, I would hear about orange juice and lemon and Coca-Cola and all this stuff. You don't want to sober up. You want to go through what you need to go through because there should be somebody there to help you. And my best friend doesn't mind me saying this. I sat for my best friend once, and she had a cartoon rat trying to take her down an alleyway to show her scenes from her life. And so I had to stay in the room because she was just like, leave me alone, I don't want to go. And she's all crying and she's all upset, and I'm just sitting there while she's being all upset. Afterwards, what she told me was she didn't want to go, so the rat brought the picture to her. And so she never did get away. She was resistant, but she still saw what she was there to see. And it was really one of the biggest breakthroughs that she's ever had. Really, really, really life-changing breakthroughs by going through that real resistance to seeing her past, which was something she always knew but was trying not to see. So, you know, I don't know. I find that if the space is held well, I haven't really heard of people in a really held space having a bad trip. What I have seen is people getting distressed at somebody's distress and interfering with somebody's trip. And that I've seen. And I've also seen the other side to that is people get really upset when they come out of it. And that's also one of the reasons why I think you have to be really, really present when you're helping somebody and not interfering too much. There was a bunch of psychotherapists who started an organization. I was invited to the first mass trip thing, and I was so flattered to be invited. I was like, yeah, you know, all these professionals, you know, I'll go. And I mean, I watched them. They were doing stuff I would never do, but I felt like because they're psychotherapists, they know what they're doing. After, I think, the third sort of mass encounter, the whole thing broke apart. Loads of people left. Loads of people were really upset because the space wasn't being held well. You had people going up to people going, are you all right? Why are you asking someone who's tripping if they're all right? Like, it's a ridiculous question. It doesn't matter if they're all right. You just have to be there. You just have to sit there. And in the end, people were really people were really upset. Somebody asked for a hug, but she was lying down, and a psychotherapist got on top of her, and and she later on said to him, I thought what you did was really inappropriate. I asked you for a hug. I actually probably didn't need a hug. I certainly didn't need a fully grown man lie on top of me and hug me. Because I felt a little bit imposter syndrome. I was the only person without any letters after my name. I watched them like, raw. But I also kind of watched them a little bit kind of thinking, well, maybe this is also a bit of a white thing, so they're a bit more, But actually, no, what was happening was inappropriate and it was wrong. And in the end, everybody left and the organization collapsed because actually they weren't doing the right thing, which is let people have their trip. If they want to scream, let them scream. Just make sure nobody jumps out of a window. But even with that, you can keep somebody safe without them even knowing it. I've been with a friend who kind of like, I didn't know her window could open really big. So she was like, I could jump out the window. And I was like, oh, I don't think you can. And then she swung it open. And I just thought, fuck. But I just slowly went to the side of the bed because she's looking down and just pushed it shut from the top and locked it. She didn't need to see me doing that. I just needed to keep her safe at that point. You don't need to grab people. You don't need to interfere. Even if they're inviting you to, it's still, you're the one who's the adult in the room. The mushrooms told me to stop eating meat because of the trauma the animals suffer in the food that we eat. And it took a long time. It still took 18 months for me to stop eating meat. So I think there can be. I was getting the message loud and clear for ages that there's too much violence in what you're eating. I got it with Iboga. Too much violence in what you're consuming with your eyes. And with my Iboga trip, my psyche became like a Google thing where you put the search, what you're searching for, but it was like my psyche and the medicine put a hose through the Google square and hosed out every bit of pornography I'd ever seen, any violence I'd seen in films. So now I just stay away from, like, any film that comes out, someone tells me, and I'm like, is it violent? And I just do my best to stay away. And actually, since then, I've learned so much about the re-traumatizing effect of films. And a typical one is, this new film, The Woman King. And without seeing anything, my friend was going to see it. And she was like, this is such an important film. You've got a dark-skinned sister, da, 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 da. And I was like, it's going to be black people killing black people. There's probably going to be enough rape and violence going on, so you hate black men by the time you leave the room. And she came back. She was like, sis, I was traumatized. I was like, I told you that's what they do. But then they give you a little veneer that makes you think something's going on. If you don't understand, what is it Neela Fuller used to say? If you don't understand this system we're in, nothing else will make sense to you. So I was really pleased that the medicine went that way to show me a whole bunch of other things about this place that we live in. Take it to the medicine. take it to the medicine. Well, you know, I started off by telling you my story, and it's just taking it to them. I mean, you know, when I was crying every day because I just thought I was the worst parent in the whole world, and you know, I didn't deserve anything because I'd ruined my son's life, and da 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 da. I didn't think, kind of like 4 years later, I'd be standing here. I didn't think at that time my son would be able to study again. He didn't think he was going to be able, even when he came out of the drug thing, he didn't think he would be able to study again. He thought he'd fucked up his brain. So all you can do is take your problems to the medicine, and you'll come out where you need to come out. You take everyday problems to the medicine. My big sister, who knows nothing about drugs, she takes the medicine for her. She has fluid on the lungs, and it keeps the fluid down. My mum takes it so that she can sleep, and it helps her with her nerve pain. We've got family back in Ghana. I ship back 28 grams every couple of months, because my nieces and nephews and cousins, we have problems as a family. And so I ship it back, and soon we're going to start growing it. We have to start with us first, and then we can start impacting everything else. So, and it's everyday problems. It's everyday problems. And the medicine clears the way in ways in which you can't even guess it's going to clear the way. But I know the parents I started out with, there was 3 of us, our sons got groomed together. And I tried to tell the other 2 about the medicines. One boy, he's still in and out of prison. And the other boy, he's in a group psychiatric home. And so I know the benefits of everyday problems with this medicine. And it's not an easy overnight thing. You know, it's taken my son 2 years to be able to go back into education. He's still working on his confidence. He still has to use the medicine every 2 to 3 to 4 months. Still. He's 20 now. So it's been just over 2 years since he came out of it, but he still has to use the medicine for our everyday problems. You've done a great job. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.